And we are live. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Forever Rugby and on Forever Sports for today's Rugby News live show. Trying something a bit different in terms of the time. It's 11:30. We're going to go live. We're trying to sort of experiment a little bit with some of the times and try and sort of stagger a couple of our shows throughout the day, so that there's sort of consistent content with people they can kind of watch at different times. So let's sort of see how we go, because we've got a very interesting show ahead of us, because there's a couple of very interesting coaching developments regarding both the Springboks as well as the All Blacks also happening, and then obviously a couple of transfer unions around, and we can start to really look ahead of the weekend ahead, because obviously there's URC action coming up, and I think it's going to be a very interesting weekend ahead for both South African sides, because you've got the likes of the Bulls who really need to go out and beat the Lions, and then you've got the Stormers who are hosting the Sharks, and the Sharks side who are desperate for a win, taking on one of the form sides in the competition, and still without their Springboks. So it's going to be a very interesting weekend ahead. But in terms of a couple of other sort of stories, well, we're talking about Nigel Owens to the Springboks, a story that's coming out today, as well as who will be the new All Blacks head coach post Rugby World Cup 2023, because there will be a new one, and that process has actually gone underway. So that's what we're going to talk about as well. I'm going to put a poll in the comments, and I'm going to ask, should the Springboks get Nigel Owens involved? Simple yes, no question. I'm going to put it out there to the community. You guys are going to vote, and we're going to see what everybody has to say. If you want to know some more information before you vote, so basically, there is a story that has popped up that Rassie Erasmus and Jacques Nienaber are looking at adding Nigel Owens to the Springbok coaching staff for the 2023 Rugby World Cup. Now, it's not a new rumor. There's been a couple of rumors that's going around and stuff like that. But I think it's going to be very sort of interesting to sort of see exactly what was to happen. And the big thing about it is that when Nzondile Stick was asked about it yesterday, they didn't deny. They didn't say that no, they're definitely not doing it. They definitely said it's nothing that they've thought about. They were quite open about the fact that maybe it might happen. So that was quite cool. So basically, in terms of the rumor, and this is what I want to talk about today, because the Springboks were asked about it yesterday. So the idea is that they want to get Nigel Owens in basically as a referee analyst for the World Cup. And these sort of reports come back from January, where basically it was said that SA Director of Rugby, Rassie was adding an expert referee analyst for the tournament. And basically the idea was for them to be able to sort of analyze the referees they were playing against, analyze sort of the way that laws are being, governed and stuff like that, and how they're being officiated, in order for the Springboks to sort of go into the World Cup and go into each game during the World Cup, knowing what to expect, and knowing why they might be pinged for certain things, why they might not be able to get away with certain things, and sort of what is being sort of officiated maybe more stringently than others. And I think it's a brilliant move. I think it's a really intelligent thing, and I think this is the kind of innovation which has made this coaching staff so successful. The ability to say, well, let's try something a bit different. What can we try? How can we do things differently? And I think especially on the back of when we've had 2 years where basically the Springboks have been labeled, referee bashers, and Rassie was banned for a year for abuse of referees, stuff like that. It's a very interesting dynamic to then go and say, okay, fine. This is our reputation. This is what everybody thinks about us. But actually, we're going to go and add a referee to our coaching staff. And I think that would be an absolutely brilliant addition. I really do. I think that, at the end of the day, officiating is becoming a massive talking point for every game. And I think a lot of it's got to do with, in fact, all of it's always got to do with new laws, and the way that new laws are now being sort of implemented and officiated. And there's a lot of grey area at the moment. And I think that it's a bit sad that we're going into a World Cup year with so much ambiguity, so much grey area, so many things that are still up for interpretation. And a lot of teams are getting things very wrong. Some referees are getting things wrong. And there seems to be a lot of sort of disconnect between exactly how the game should be officiated, or how we believe it should be officiated, versus how it actually is being officiated. And what is the best way to do that? Well, maybe it's to add a referee to the coaching staff. And whilst you're training, whilst you're having these team meetings, instead of, as coaches and as players and even analysts sort of deciding, well, these are what the laws are and this is how I do it, have somebody who's been there, who's made these calls, who is still up to date with exactly how all these things are happening, as as an expert about it. Instead of us saying this is how we interpret the rules, the referee can say, no, listen, I've been there, I've done that, I've been part of the meetings. This is actually how we do it. This is actually what we look out for. And within that, sort of, that kind of helps you identify again what you can get away with, what you can't get away with, how you can get away with things, how you can't get away with things, and what to focus on. And I personally think that this would be a fantastic move, for example, for Asiya Khaleesi, in terms of understanding how to speak to referees, what sort of things to ask them, how to ask them, what you kind of want to focus on, what you don't want to focus on. And not to say that we don't speak to referees very well, but at the end of the day, there's always room for improvement. I think when you start thinking that there isn't, that's when you start going backwards. You've always got to continue looking to innovate. And if we do decide to innovate and we do try and go after, then why not go and get the best referee arguably of all time? We have seen quite a few. This isn't a new concept, by the way. We have seen other players. I think it was Montpellier has recruited a referee to help sort of with discipline. I think Roman Potter's doing some coaching. So it's not a new thing that the Springboks are sort of pioneering, really. But we haven't really seen this on an international front. Although I think that France or the French team actually, I think might actually have somebody in there as well who's helping them. So I think it'll be a very good move, and I think especially given the fact that the South Africans are there's this sort of growing rhetoric that that Springboks are just referee bashers, and that the South African public just hate referees, and that there's sort of zero respect from us, which I think has been very much over exaggerated. But at the end of the day, this is a very good way to move away from that sort of stigma, to sort of maybe move yourselves away and sort of leave that kind of thought process and that kind of attitude behind, and say, no, listen, we're not that. And we're willing to try and improve, and we're willing to try and keep, changing things to sort of help us. And we're going to bring in a referee to do that. And again, I think going in Nigel Owens, I think there's two reasons that he's the right person. First of all, obviously, he is incredibly experienced. Second of all, he's still quite up to date with things. He does clips for World Rugby. He's still up to date with the laws. He's still very actively engaged in the game. Which is obviously one of the most important things. You don't want somebody who hasn't been around, hasn't been really sort of keeping up with the trends, all of a sudden part of it, and not sort of knowing it. So he does know his stuff. At the end of the day, well, that's not even a question. He knows what's going on. Second of all, he has got a huge profile, and do not underestimate how respected he is within the refereeing world. You go into a match as a referee, and you are now officiating a side who are being coached by somebody you've looked up to, and I think it just gives a lot more weight into it. I think that it shows you that the Springboks are really dedicated to sort of getting this right, because they've gone and gotten the best person out there to do it. So I don't think there are any downsides to this concept, actually. I really don't. Michelle's saying that if this was true, Russia should start a GoFundMe. I would gladly donate my whole month's wage to see this happen. They should take the 1 billion from Tottenham for this. Brilliant. AC says, very good move. Rassie also does not need to throw himself in front of the train. Nigel will take the issue and he will get more respect from top refs. Referees also relate well to Nigel. Exactly. Michelle then also saying, can you also imagine the respect Springboks will earn by the rest of the referees when they see how serious the Boks are about taking the rules and getting someone in with the caliber of Nigel Owens? Well, this is the thing, isn't it? It's not about us not respecting the laws. It's not about us not respecting referees. It's about us saying, right, we're actually going to really embrace this challenge. We're not going to sweep it aside. We're not going to try and sort of decide we know better. We're actually going to go find someone who does know better. And I don't think too many people know better than Nigel Owens. So I think it's a really positive move. I think it'll help a lot from a PR perspective, which never hurts. And I do think that obviously, from an analysis point of view, in terms of being able to sort of get the best out of the teams and get the most out of situations, it can only help, really. As I said, I struggle to see any downsides. So I really hope that this happens. But the reason I'm talking about it is because yesterday, Zondiles Dick was asked about it. And he said, one, we will have to ask the director of rugby about that. But if we can get someone with us to advise us on those matters and let the coaches concentrate on coaching and the players to do their jobs on the field, it will be a positive for the team. He then said, Nigel Owens was then asked, and he said, I haven't heard anything, but it would certainly be an honour, he said to City Press when asked about the comment of the latest news. Nobody else has really been added to it. So basically, the Springboks are not denying it. Nigel Owens is certainly not saying, I wouldn't want to do it. So make it happen, people. Rassie Erasmus, make it happen. Make it happen. Let's go and get Nigel Owens into the Springbok setup. let's get him in. Let's sort out the issues. Let's sort out the stigma against the Springboks. Let's go into the World Cup and really understand from an analysis point of view, from a refereeing point of view, how to get things right from a discipline perspective and how to really understand the laws and not let them become a major obstacle towards us winning things. And that's what we're going to sort of see. So it does sound like it could very well happen. As I said, it sounds like all parties are pretty keen. Obviously, it comes down to whether you can formalize an agreement, where you can find some middle ground and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting couple of months ahead to see if this does pull off. But if we can pull it off, then I think that it puts the Springboks into a very, very nice situation. So yeah, so that's sort of the Nigel Owens thing. Again, very cool to see that they weren't ruling it out, but we'll have to wait and see exactly what will happen. But yeah, moving on, also into the coaching sort of sphere, New Zealand have confirmed that the process for finding the next New Zealand coach post the 2023 World Cup is underway. Now that first of all means that it will be post the World Cup. Nothing is happening before the World Cup. Ian Foster will be the coach for the World Cup. That's not a discussion. That is just the fact. So that is not going to change. Ian Foster is the current All Black coach, and he will be the All Black coach at the World Cup. However, he has personally confirmed that he will not be reapplying for the job. His contract ends after the World Cup, and he will not be carrying on. In a statement that he released, Ian Foster said, "As I said last week, I felt the best thing for our team and entire management group was to have this process done after the World Cup. That hasn't happened, but we'll accept the decision to move on. I won't be reapplying for the job of head coach." And I think that he raises a good point. So basically, he's not happy. And the reason that he's not happy is that they have started to replace him whilst he's still there. And at the end of the day, I think that has probably also shaped him not reapplying because, first of all, right now he's reapplying on his current credentials. Now, he can go and win the World Cup, and they've applied another coach. So it is a bit strange for me. I don't understand what the kind of rush is. Actually, I do understand the rush. The rush at the end of the day is getting Razor signed down. Scott Robertson is the one that they want. He wants it, and I think that they're worried that if they wait any longer, they might lose it because I think he is quite willing to listen to other options, to look at other teams if an offer doesn't come his way from New Zealand Rugby. And I think that's actually in many ways sort of forced New Zealand Rugby's hand. They're now in a situation, well, if they don't go and offer him, he might end up at a different team, might end up at a different nation, and they can't afford to lose him. So I think that is kind of probably why they are sort of doing the process beforehand. And I think it's a strange situation, and I can understand Ian Foster's grievances. Your replacement is going to be named before you even had a chance to win a World Cup, for example. They're actively looking for a new coach, which means that whilst they say we fully back you for the World Cup, we're going to replace you afterward, by the way, because we don't think. And maybe again, it's difficult to say, we don't think you're good enough because he could reapply for the job. But at the end of the day, they're starting a process to find someone. Which means that even if he is the best candidate, they are looking to see what's out there, which means that they don't have 100% trust in him. It's a bit like saying right now, cool, let's start advertising for a new Springbok coach and new director of rugby. And people going, well, if they win the World Cup again, why would we want to replace these guys? So I can understand Ian Foster's frustration. I do think it's quite hectic to be looking for a replacement before your sort of biggest moment and biggest sort of tournament to really... To really prove what you are as a coach. And but at the end of the day, I think their hands have been forced by the fact that Scott Robertson is coming out and being very vocal about wanting to coach international rugby, and more importantly, being willing to look at other options outside New Zealand. And I think that obviously he is the leading candidate. I think he's probably the only candidate they're looking for, and I think it's a formality almost that this whole process is going to take place. But you have to go through the process, don't you? You have to follow the process set in place. And they've now had to speed up this process, I think, to try and tie him down. And so it's not great for Ian Foster. You kind of feel for the man. But at the end of the day, New Zealand Rugby have identified the coach that they think is going to take them into the future. Scott Robertson's got a phenomenal record as coach of the Crusaders, and people have been asking why hasn't he been given a shot, even yet, and why it's taken so long to even be considering him. People are saying that he should have gotten the job before Ian Foster. So yeah, I think it has been a rush decision. Well, it's not even a rush decision, but I think to bring over the process is simply to try and tie him down. I personally think it's quite nice that we're not going to have him before the World Cup, but I do think he's going to do some good things. I also think that it does kind of make sense to bring somebody in, after the World Cup. Why put somebody in now with 6 months to try and implement your sort of style of play with an existing squad and stuff like that? I don't think you can successfully do it. I think if you're going to pull the trigger, I think you had to pull the trigger beginning of last year and had a full test season, 12 tests and another sort of 6 tests. So I had 18 tests to implement your structures. Now, if you sort of apply, appoint a coach, you're going to get maybe 5 tests before. So it's too late. It is far too late. And so I do think it's the right thing to not appoint somebody now. But I do think that Scott Robertson will be the man to take them forward. What will be interesting, however, is from a player personnel point of view, who you will actually have available for him post the World Cup. Because there's a lot of rumours about a lot of New Zealand players leaving. I think that obviously, Aaron Smith is leaving, rumors that Richie Mwanga's going. The Barretts are considering their futures because at the moment you can't be selected for the All Blacks if you play outside New Zealand. And at the end of the day, there's so many lucrative offers on the table for these players that they're sitting there going, do I really want to stay in New Zealand? Like, is this really what is best for me right now? And obviously at the end of the day, the younger players are. But as an older player who's, sort of 30 or 31 after the World Cup, you're sitting there thinking, I'm coming into the last 4 or 5 years of my career. Let me go play overseas. And what a lot of players do, especially that sort of 30, 31, there's no sort of, for example, British and Irish Lions tour coming up in the next World Cup cycle. So they go and say, cool, let me sign a 2-year contract in Japan or in the top 14 or whatever. And they get a sabbatical and they don't play international rugby for like 2 years and they can earn all the money. And then they come back, usually like sort of, 2 years before the World Cup, and they can sort of get themselves back in the mix if they're good enough and they're still, at that level. So that is kind of often the way that some of these people go. So yeah, I'm interested to see what'll happen but because apparently the process for to appoint the new coach for New Zealand should be done in the next sort of few weeks. In the next 6 weeks. So basically by the end of April, there will be a new All Blacks coach announced for after the World Cup. Who it'll be, pretty much guaranteed Scott Robertson, but we wait and see. But yeah, Ingebulo is saying, screw Nigel Owens. He has literally called out incorrect calls on the World Rugby show, and he has a lot more of time to look at and apply solid reason to those calls. It's pointless. Why is it pointless? I don't understand why it's pointless, to be honest. The fact that he is doing that, I think, shows you that he's currently reviewing everything at the moment and has genuine knowledge on what's going on. So, yeah, not sure that I'm following the logic there. At the end of the day, if anyone can add any value to the Springboks, then I think he should be getting in, and I think he could add a tremendous amount of value. But anyway, and as King XRD says, please do like the video, by the way. It's trying to get as many people jumping into the stream as possible. And yeah, let's go out and let's do some cool things with the show. Yeah, we will be live tomorrow night with the Rugby Fan Forum, which can be really fun. We're also going to be releasing a betting video, a sort of guide or how to bet video in the next couple of days, which is going to sort of show you exactly what goes on there. And yeah, in terms of this weekend, shall we talk about some URC rugby this weekend, shall we? Because there's 2 big games from a South African perspective, because there's only 2 games that for South Africans are playing. This weekend, it is Bulls versus Lions at Loftus and Stormers versus Sharks at in Cape Town. 2:30 and 5:15 are the 2 kickoffs. Stormers versus Sharks. I spoke a little about yesterday about the whole fact that there's a potential protest plan for the Stormers. I'm not going to go too much into that. But I think let's just talk about the log, shall we, and where they're at. And at the end of the day, this Sharks side, and I put a video out yesterday, is very close for me to being in big trouble because they are playing the Stormers this weekend, who are in some terrific form. And as we go into round 15, and if we look at the table, right now the Sharks sitting 7th, so they're right on the top 8. But they are sitting on 40 points. Now, if, for example, the Stormers get it right and really go and hammer the Sharks and Sharks leave the Cape Town Stadium with nothing, they will still be on 40 points. Where they need to be a bit worried is the likes of Benetton, Cardiff, and Connacht, to a lesser degree, Edinburgh, who are all kind of within reaching distance. And if you look at who they're playing, you've got Benetton taking on Ospreys, who have had some good games, but I think are a beatable side. Ospreys are at home, which does make a difference. Connacht's taking Dragons, which are not playing particularly well. So Connacht were to get a bonus point victory against them, they'd actually go tied with the Sharks. And if we look at Cardiff, they're hosting Ulster. So that'll be a bit of a saving grace to the Sharks, the fact that they probably won't really back Cardiff to be able to get a result against Ulster. But again, a lot of international players missing for a lot of these clubs, not sort of at full strength necessarily. Upsets can happen. And sometimes, teams where they don't have that many internationals, they can sometimes make use of that, like the Lions did against the Glasgow Warriors. So I think Benetton and Connacht are the two more likely to get victories. And again, if the Sharks come away with no points, then all of a sudden they are going to be very, very catchable, which puts a lot of pressure on them. And when the Springboks come back, are they going to have to try and bail them out of jail? In that respect, or are they going to have, or can they get a win this week and really sort of put themselves quite firmly into that top 8? Because they can go and beat the Stormers, for example, and get themselves sort of 40. Can just sort of pick up maybe like one more win. They're probably 2 wins away from solidifying that spot. But you lose this game, I think they're then traveling. You lose 2 in a row and suddenly you start panicking. It's amazing how pressure can do a lot of things to a lot of different teams. And they'll be pretty cognizant of that. Similarly, though, to the Bulls, who are playing the Lions. The Lions sitting at 29 points, so they're about 22 points behind the Bulls. Bulls having won 8 games, the Lions winning just 6. They've actually got the reverse sort of season. Bulls have played 14, won 8, lost 6. Lions have played 14, won 6, lost 8. The Lions cannot afford, the Bulls can't afford for the Lions to be a banana skin. They did, I think the Bulls have had moments, but at the end of the day, they're on a really bad run at the moment of results. And form is a strange thing. Confidence is down in that team. There's no doubt about it. They can tell us right now that they're not feeling the pressure and that they're feeling very comfortable. Confidence can't be very high at that union. They must be a bit nervous. And Lions, on the other hand, might be feeling a little bit better about things. They beat Glasgow Warriors, quite well as well. They might be sitting there thinking, we can actually back ourselves a little bit here. And as a Lions fan, I'm not particularly confident we're going to get a job done at Loftus, but who knows? Maybe there is a scare in there. Maybe the Bulls are playing that badly at the moment, and all the Lions need to do is pitch up and string together a good 25-minute period, and they can put themselves in a winning position and get a result. I think that game again is not as easy as it would seem. On the face of it, Bulls win it every day of the week, but there's so many external factors, and then once again we talk about the Sharks missing out on potential, top 8. Bulls are sitting on 41 points, and they've got some very tricky fixtures coming up as well. So if they were to lose against the Lions, once again, it can open a door for a couple of these teams to kind of sneak up on them. Which I suppose makes for a nice little finish. You almost kind of want to see, in the last weekend, 3-4 teams all vying for, 2 spots in the Champions Cup, in the playoffs and stuff. Almost like a last 16 game ahead of a quarterfinal, semi-final, final. So it does add a lot to sort of the occasion and to what's going on. So it's nice in that respect. But obviously, if you're a fan of the Bulls or the Sharks, you want to go and win your next 2 games and get yourself pretty firmly in that top 8 and not sit there and worry about whether you're actually going to be playing playoffs, whether you're going to be playing in the Champions Cup next season. We've also got the Champions Cup coming up, so the idea of squad rotation and keeping your squad fresh becomes even more important in the coming weeks, and especially when a lot of these players, for example, have been missing because of international duties. So either training with internationals or playing Six Nations. So once again, managing workloads, very different in terms of Six Nations players. They're managing workloads in that they're playing test matches and then back at the club, and they don't want to overload them. Now it's almost a case of match sharpness for South African players who have now been in camp for 2 weeks. They need to then get back and start playing. How match sharp will they be? Are they going to be able to hit the ground running? Are they in better shape when they left? What's their conditioning going to be after 2 weeks? More of a match sharpness than a condition, like physical condition. They would be physically very fit, but what sort of match sharpness will they have, having not played in a couple of weeks? So even more than that, they had a week off, then 2 weeks in camp. So some of these players will, by the time they play, will have not played for a month. And sometimes it could just take a while to get back into sort of the swing of things. And some of these teams can't afford for their best players to take a while to get back to the swing of things because they need results and they need them now. So, yeah, a couple of other sort of things sort of adding to it. But, yeah, that's pretty much it for today. As I said, Wednesday, so we've got a couple of the... If we look at the URC fixtures this weekend, let's just go through them. Glasgow Warriors versus Zebra Palmer on Friday evening, as well as Munster versus Scarlets. We've then got Stormers versus Sharks, Bulls versus Lions. In the evening on Saturday, we've got Edinburgh versus Leicester, Ospreys versus Benetton, Dragons versus Connacht, and Great Cardiff versus Ulster. So plenty of action happening across the competition. And some very nice games as well. You know, I think Edinburgh-Leinster should be an interesting game. I'm hoping that Ospreys-Benetton is going to be quite entertaining, but I do think the two local derbies are sort of games to watch as well. Because, yeah, you expect Glasgow to do a job against Zebra. Munster versus Scarlet should be pretty one-sided. Dragons versus Connacht should be pretty one-sided. And Cardiff versus Ulster, well, maybe Cardiff can get a bit of a surprise. But again, you kind of expect it to be pretty one-sided. So, yeah, I'm going to end the poll. We've had 43 people vote. The overwhelming decision is that, yes, we do need to get Nigel Owens involved. 83% people are saying, yes, it would be a good idea. Alpha Lingus says, Nigel is a PR stunt, many more technical heads already at the box. Yeah, but at the end of the day, if you can get somebody who can even that little bit more in-depth feedback, then why not? And we'll have to wait and see. Again, once again, to recap, the Springboks have not denied they are looking at it, and Nigel Owens has certainly not said that he wouldn't do it if he were to be asked. Please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steven. I'll chat to you soon.